pleasant good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Ask the Leader. I am Erasmus Williams. The number to call is 466-5977. That is 466-5977. And we welcome all listeners and viewers to the various media platforms, KISS 102.5 FM, also the Facebook pages of KISS 102.5 FM, Dr. Denzil Douglas, Dr. Terence Drew, the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, Young Labour and Vision 2020. Welcome once again, and a reminder also that this program will be rebroadcast tomorrow, Wednesday at 12 noon. Welcome once again. Well, we are live in the studio, and with me is the Right Honourable Dr. Denzil Douglas, political leader of the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party and the former Prime Minister. Dr. Douglas, welcome to the studios of KISS 102.5 FM.
Thank you, Erasmus, and a very good afternoon to those who are tuning in at home and abroad by radio and by way of internet. I want to thank you once again for your continued interest in this program as we meet every Tuesday to discuss the issues that are of concern to all of us. Of course, we would have moved this program about 2.5 hours earlier because, of course, the situation in the country is different to what it normally is. And so I would like also to thank KYSSFM for never failing to provide this opportunity to broadcast this program on radio and internet. I trust that tonight's broadcast finds you and your families as well as can be under these very trying circumstances. I know that many, if not all of you, who are listening to the sound of my voice are in lockdown conditions, whether you are tuning in here in St. Kitts and Nevis or you are overseas. I know that being under a 24-hour curfew has been a very difficult adjustment, physically, financially, and psychologically. I was very disturbed, of course, to hear yesterday of at least one violent incident that erupted in Keon. Of course, we do not know the circumstances as yet, and so I do not wish to make any comment on this. But I would want to say that lockdown will be very difficult for those who are already suffering from mental disorders such as schizophrenia, bipolarism, and in fact depression. It also will be hard on those who are in abusive relationships. If you find yourself under severe stress or in danger, of course, there are so many things that you can do, many people that you can call. In fact, I'm told that one can contact a trained counselor at number 662-8086, 662-8086 at any time of day or night. I would also encourage persons to look out for your neighbors, especially those who you know have a history of mental issues or domestic issues. I ask of you, my fellow citizens and residents, and all those who are listening to this program, I ask you to be vigilant and keep on the lookout for any sign of abuse of women and children in troubled families. In these times, we must all be our brother's keeper, and a simple word of encouragement over the fence can get a long way to break the sense of isolation, to let persons know that someone cares and someone is in fact watching. For those of you who may be suffering from cabin fever, practicing self-care is very important. I want you to ensure that you are, one, eating right and practicing daily grooming. Not because you may not be going outside. You must practice daily grooming. You must exercise for at least 15 minutes each day. You must use the time to set new goals and new agendas. You must read a good book, if not 1, 2, 3, if you can. Try a new recipe if you are accustomed to be in the kitchen like me. Connect with family and friends on social media. Go outside and stand in your yard for a few minutes of sunshine. This will help to take away the stress. And while you're there, you can take some very deep breaths. Play your favorite music or enjoy an indoor game with your family. Or as you did last night, go and enjoy the virtual concert that we had on Easter Monday. I want to thank EK, I want to thank Hellfire and all of those other artists who gave a splendid concert last night. This is the kind of thing that you can become engaged in. I want you also to pray. Utter some prayers. They will go a long way. Especially you can go out to those who are sick and under quarantine, both at home and abroad. I would also like to express my condolences to the families of nationals in the diaspora who have passed away after contracting COVID-19. Whether you are in London, in England, whether you are in New York, in Miami, whether you are in New Jersey, in the United States, our hearts go out to you and your families. Even though you are in the United States of America, wherever you are, we definitely would want you to know that we are with you in our prayers. The virus is impacting all of us, and we must look to the Almighty for strength, for peace and comfort in these very trying and difficult times. I want to pause for a moment to wish all a happy Easter. Of course, Easter is a special time for the people of our Federation. The story of the cross is a story of victory and a story of rebirth. I want us to look to the cross in this crisis, knowing that with God, our nation, it too will rise again. Easter is also a time when we honor traditions, cooking our traditional Easter meal of saltfish, coconut dumplings, and conky. It is also a time when our families would have been out and about in our parks and hillsides, flying kites with our children. Yesterday, which was Easter Monday, would have found us on the beach or partaking of fun and games at our annual Black Rocks Fun Day. I was very happy that the young people in our party decided that we will celebrate despite lockdown conditions. Our party held a virtual Easter party online, which featured several of our finest local artists and DJs. Imagine, the guys and the ladies were calling for their drinks. They said they were standing next to the Young Labour Bar ordering their drinks. People were even ordering hot dogs, would you believe, in this virtual party. I enjoyed it myself. The event was an even bigger hit than expected, attracting over 1,900 live views. But I'm told that more than 7,000 people would have viewed this at some time. The St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, it is committed to using the technology that is available to keep our people entertained and informed during this crisis. Innovation is the name of the game with the next Gen SKM when it comes to meeting the needs of our people. Innovation, technology, creativity, they go hand in hand. Now, permit me for a moment to look at how the most vulnerable among us have been impacted by COVID-19. Although the number of persons confirmed with the COVID-19 coronavirus proliferation has been relatively small in number when compared with other countries, we find that the economic recession that has been forced by this public health crisis is having a very severe impact on our people. In fact, the last few weeks of 24-hour lockdown has meant that many businesses have been forced to close, some, of course, of which have closed indefinitely. So many of our young people, so many of those who have been involved in the hospitality industry, so many of our self-employed, such as our taxi drivers, our bus drivers, our barbers, our hairdressers, our plumbers, the electricians, and the hundreds who eke out a living in the informal economy have seen their sources of income virtually disappear. This has had a devastating impact, most especially on those who we will call the working poor, who live by paycheck to paycheck, with no savings to call their own. These are the persons who are in need of immediate help now in order to be able to feed themselves and their families and meet their daily basic needs. Not all of them have the privilege of receiving meals cooked by the school meals and school feeding program. Not all of them are so privileged to be selected to receive these meals. Unfortunately, help is not getting to these people fast enough. And while monies have been earmarked by the government during this crisis, the process to access these funds, that process has been very, very slow. And it has become a barrier to those who are really in need. These are the people who, I think, are finding it difficult to really exist on a daily basis. These are the people to whom my heart and our hearts go out to. These are the people who really need help, urgent help. And I use this opportunity to make a very strong appeal to the authorities to come to their rescue before they eventually become permanently affected, I would say, as a result of the situation. It is very vital that the government agencies responsible for administering these support programs find a way to find these people where they are so that they can get the help that they so desperately need. Our social workers should be spreading out in the community and knocking on doors to bring help to the needy and getting vital information, such as bank account information, to make the transfer of funds much easier and reliable. There is a need for our officials to apply creativity and common sense to ensure that they are able to deliver the most for the most in our society who really need assistance. Think of the retired person who is receiving minimum pension from Social Security, but who has had to go out and find extra work in order to make a living, is now cut off as a result of losing that job, and now is also locked out from receiving any assistance from the Social Security. One has to be creative, one has to be compassionate. And even though in your own books such a person does not qualify, what about your compassion? What about the need to recognize that this is a person who is critically in need? We cannot afford to let our people and our families fall through the cracks at this critical time. This would only create an environment of discontent, an environment of unrest, and an environment that can possibly lead to an increase in crime and criminality. And so this is why it was really irresponsible for the administration of today, the Harris administration, not to have included a feeding program as part of its rapid response plans. For instance, in many countries, the school meals program remained operational even during these days of school closure, providing hot breakfast and hot lunches for our own children. But what do we see here? We understand that the school feeding kitchen has been used not to feed the children, but to feed a selected few in a few selected constituencies to exact, in my opinion, political gain. Our party is committed to doing our part to fill the void that has been created due to a lack of a compassionate program for our working poor and the many who are unemployed. I want to also, of course, make mention of what is happening by or through the Next Gen SKM CARES initiative. So far, over 2,000 care packages have been issued to persons who are vulnerable. Those in particular who are elderly and shut-ins, those who are mentally and physically challenged, they were the recipients of the first 1,000 care packages. And then those who have been displaced from their work, whether they were in the manufacturing sector, in the hospitality sectors, whether they were old or young, they are the beneficiaries of the second 1,000 of care packages that have been issued through the Next Gen SKM CARES initiative. And when, of course, we are allowed again to mobilize, this would continue because there are still several hundreds of persons who have been displaced, those in hotels, in restaurants, in bars, who have not yet received such support and assistance, and they would now be targeted, and they would receive up to as many as 5,000 care packages, which we intend to give to our people who have been displaced. This program has been well received. I want to thank the very many people who were the benefactors, who came to support this initiative. I want to also recall the tears that flowed from so many people's eyes when they received their packages. Too many of us are still living under very desperate and difficult conditions. Again, I want to thank my colleagues who have been out there distributing these care packages, showing to our people that we really care, irrespective of your color, irrespective of your political support. As long as you are one who would have been vulnerable and affected by this particular pandemic, we have tried to reach out to you so that you would be the beneficiary of from the generosity of our benefactors. And so I want to thank again those humanitarians, those good people in our community, our businesses, our churches, who are reaching out to those in need. I want to thank in particular, and very many others, but I know in particular Mr. Ernest Amory of Amory Bakery, who publicly demonstrated his generosity. Our party is committed to our creed for the good that we can do. This is not about politics, I emphasize. There is a role for all of us to play in some small way to help the needy. Whether it is buying groceries for an elderly neighbor or bring a hot lunch to a neighbor living with a disability, that is part of the generosity. Many have been suffering for almost a whole month now. And unfortunately, the plans and programs organized under the Prime Minister's stimulus program are poorly designed and don't appear to be very well thought through. Too many people have been left out from these programs. I continue to call on the government to revisit the $35 million earmarked for mortgage and business loans and provide a multiple-tiered system of income support that puts money in the pockets of our difficult families. There is a better way for this to be done. The St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party has many ideas as to how the government response can be improved. The opposition is part of the government of St. Kitts and Nevis too. And this is why we have been asking for a seat at the table. Every other country in the Caribbean has done so. Only here in St. Kitts and Nevis it is different. However, all of our offers to cooperate and help with the national response have been rejected. I don't even want to begin to mention in any detail the unfortunate situation with regard to the test kits which have been received here in St. Kitts and Nevis, taken to the ministry officials, received by the chief medical officer with gratitude, it would appear, and then to be rejected by the junior minister, Senator Phipps. These are the same kits that have been received by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the government of Grenada, and also by the government of Antigua and Dominica. But here in St. Kitts and Nevis, they are being rejected. Why? Because of petty party politics. Still, not enough persons are being tested, and the numbers of outstanding test results remain too high for our comfort. As of yesterday, there were still 44 results that were pending. We are still calling for all persons who are quarantined to be tested. The importance of testing in this fight cannot be overemphasized. A portion of the $16 million provided in additional financing to the health sector should be allocated to providing testing free of cost to our people. What is the government doing with these funds, we ask? We understand that no new ventilators have been added to the hospital. Nothing has been bought. Everything that might have come would have been gifted, donated. Our nurses, our orderlies, and other health workers are still not provided with the personal protective gear that has been approved for COVID-19. Masks and gloves, these alone, I should say, they are just not enough. They're just not enough to keep our frontline health workers safe. There has not been any update about the preparation of an isolation ward at the Jusseau France General Hospital. The government has not even distributed, I should say, free masks for our people. And those who are wearing a mask is really a requirement for persons leaving their homes. So what is the money being used for? Again, we ask our government. These are the questions that we must seek the absolute and necessary answers. I want to stop here now and open the lines to take a few of our questions and to take some comments as we continue this particular discussion. I'm very troubled, in particular, before I open the lines, that many of those who would be the beneficiaries of the government support programs are really not the beneficiaries. When we hear, for example, that persons would get up to $1,000, what does that really mean? Up to $1,000. It does not mean that persons would be given $1,000. They can be given up to. And so if you are receiving some salary of some kind, you would have that made up to $1,000. Too many people have been asking me if they are going to receive $1,000. The answer, I'm afraid, is no. It is going to be made up. Whatever you're receiving now, if you're receiving the PAP, for example, which is $500, you would only get an additional $500. Even though for you to have received the PAP, your household income would have been less than $3,000. Now that that income has disappeared, you're only left with the PAP, $500. And what the government will do is give you another $500. I think this needed to be clarified. And so I thank those who have called and asked me to clarify it today, because that is what it is. That is my understanding, and that is what the government has said. Let us pause for a while, and let us open the lines and see if we would be able to receive any comments or questions from our listeners, and then we can move into another aspect of our program. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Douglas. The number to call is 466-5977, and we take our first call. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Ask the leader.
Good afternoon, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Douglas. Couple of questions. Is Julian Hamilton demoted as the Minister of Health? That's one.
If you say it again, could you ask the question?
I'm asking the question, is Eugene Hamilton being demoted as the Minister of Health in this country?
Oh, I see. Okay.
The next question, the other one is, I've been hearing up and down, Timothy been ranting and wait. Mr. Douglas, let me ask you the question. Once most of the world could hear. Are you willing to work with this government concerning the situation we are in today? Because you see, we're hearing Timothy ranting and raving. And for the longest while, I've been hearing you guys at this stage. Whatever it takes, you're willing to help. You're willing to lend out, put a hand out. I listen to a lady today. I mean, we have some very, very, very ignorant people in this country, you know. And the leader of the ignorant is the man at the top. We fail to face the reality. We need to be cutting all kind of corners. A lady calling today. Freedom. Well, me now work with the Douglas and the man. This is the same lady. Go to town hall meeting, talking about the crime, talking about the gangsters come together, and peace. But you're calling in and saying, we ain't got to work with the Douglas. We ain't got to work with the opposition. That is why our country in disarray. Because the people in charge are not willing to put a lending hand. Look at our situation today. You can't do it alone. I listened to a speech from a lady from Barbados. She said, everybody is on board. The leader for Grenada saying the same thing. Everywhere around the world. And now, they want to blame you guys. Why? Because of the any rumors, we should cancel the election. Well, Mr. Douglas, let's be the situation. Because some of us want to be fair. Okay? Let's say, from the beginning, you guys was on board. Canceling the election would have come from everybody. I mean, that you as opposition and the government would have been together. But if you guys keep pushing with the opposition, how you guys going to work with the government? When everything should have been happening, that you guys working in secret throughout the whole idea of this thing. The other day you guys can't get out no food, but they're getting out food. It is frustrating for the opposition and the people of the country. We need to work hand in hand, Mr. Douglas. And when the man at the top decide to put out the hand and understand, we don't go forward. You guys keep saying you're willing to help. They're trying everything to bring the you. Here we are today. The same test kits are in Grenada, in St. Vincent, in St. Lucia. Mr. Douglas, every single one of these guys in the government need investigating. This is not just all working hand in hand. Look at Cameron Wilkerson. Look at the CMO. Come on, people. Look at the guy who's in charge of NEMO. Let's be real. We need to be professional. And I'm not convinced that we're getting the best information and the best behavior of these people. Not when you can't put everybody involved. And I can say it again, Mr. Douglas. If they are doing the work and everybody was on board, Dr. Joe probably would not go and order the kits. Because they would have been telling him, he would have told them what he's going to order. At the same time, they said, well, no, don't let's order these. Let's check them out first before you bring them. But guess what, Mr. Douglas? The man bring them. And when the people like Rock calling him to put the thing them in the incinerator and burn them, people like Rockefeller, it shows you the level, the arrogant, the evilness of a lot of people in the country, including the leader. Freedom FM was supposed to be shut down, Freedom FM was supposed to shut down 3 years ago, He said crazy people was calling in on it. This is the leader then. How can we forget these things? Timothy Harris is carrying us down the wrong road. He keeps constantly dividing us. Look at the last speech. You refused to shake his hand. Well, look, let's say that was true, Mr. Douglas. Really, don't come with that after 3 years ago. He said you come on the program and said, Mr. Douglas, let us do this thing right. Let all of us come together and sit down on the table. Douglas, when you was in power, how much time I talk about you going on the table, Douglas and Timothy? You can't talk no more. You guys have a lovely day.
The demotion of Minister Hamilton, I don't even know how to respond to that, because we have not been officially informed that the Minister of Health, Richard Hamilton, has been demoted. We have not been told that the portfolio, that is the Ministry of Health, has been taken away from him. But what we have seen clearly is...
Can you hold your thought here, Pierre,
yes,
while we take the next
Another
caller?
call? Yes.
Yes. Caller?
Good
Ask the leader.
afternoon, Brother Erasmus and Dr. Douglas.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I must compliment you on the Easter message, sir. That is a message of hope. Our message, it was a light for people who are in the tunnel, the dark tunnel of despair. And I must thank you for it. You see, sir, when you are a real leader, you have to soar. You have to soar above the fray. And you have to bring hope and relief and expectations to your people. And that is what you did in the message. And I congratulate you again. No, Mr. PM, Mr. Dr. Douglas, we have a situation which is a national crisis. A national crisis. This calls for everybody on board. And I am surprised that the leaders of the church, or the church leaders, are not calling out for the unity, the united effort of the people in the country. And they're not pestering the leader, our Prime Minister, to forget yesterday's and rise to the occasion and unite the people to attack this this virus. Because we need all hands on deck. We need all hands on deck. And no one set of people have the answers for the crisis. And no one set of people can come up with all the suggestions. So we need a multiplicity of ideas and suggestions for us to attack the coronavirus. because it is affecting all of us. TAM, PLP, Labour, CCM, NRP, all of us. And so we need to get together. Now, Mr. PM, no, Dr. Harris, Dr. Douglas, I heard of a situation at the camp the other day.
Yes.
Where the deputy leader, Mr. Sean Richards, visited the camp, and he was tested, and he asked what it is all about. And when it was explained to him what it was all about, he said, okay, test me. 15 minutes later, our Prime Minister came up, and there was a big hullabaloo. You can't test me, I'm the Prime Minister. But the man in England, the leader of the government in England, was infected with the virus. And why couldn't he just meekly submit like Sean Richards and take the test and go on, because they were just testing for temperature. They were not taking off his clothes. They were just testing his temperature for him to go, because if he was contaminated, he could have infected the whole of the camp, all our soldiers. So the arrogance of the man, his failure to invite all the members on board to attack the virus, and his arrogance in submitting to the testing before going onto the campus of the Defense Force. Now the officer in charge had to carry out all his orders. He was given orders, so he had to carry it out. But the Prime Minister, and the thing about it, Mr. Dr. Douglas, is that the Prime Minister is not in charge of the Defense Force. The Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Force is the Governor General. The commander of the Defense Force is the Governor General. And what happened to government headquarters? Nobody could have signaled or communicated that the Prime Minister was coming up. And if you can give him certain conditions to let him pass. But you see the arrogance and leadership, or great leaders, I should say. Great leaders were born. They were not made. And now that Dr. Harris is facing this crisis, he has failed so miserably. You continue to be the great leader that you were born to be, sir. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, caller. Thank you for your compliments and for the wisdom that you have brought to our discussion. I was saying that there has not been any announced demotion of Minister Hamilton from the Ministry of Health. But I believe that the question has been asked because over the last few weeks in particular, we have seen what appears to have been a silent Minister Hamilton being overruled and overrun and overshadowed by the Senator Junior Minister. So I'm not surprised that you're asking that question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Douglas. Let us go to the phone lines and we say a pleasant good afternoon to our next caller. Caller, ask the leader.
Good afternoon, Mr. William.
Good afternoon.
How your day is going?
Very good.
And good afternoon, Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas. How your day is going?
So excellent.
Give thanks for life. I would just like to engage in your conversation you bring to the format of the public ears that pertaining to the Constitution that is vowed from 1983, and now, as the Prime Minister stated in his appeal to the public at large and the general public, to the people understanding what is in the format of this COVID-19 or the COVID virus. As I would like to say, I heard him say that they have suspended the Constitution from our rights being protected, and now they have gone into regulation and they have gone into the provision. But knowing that you were a part of the leadership from in the election call in 1995 to 2000 and 2015 when you lost the election. I would like to see on the mandate that you all engaged within the information tools of how this regulation and this provision that give the Prime Minister this indication what he take on this level as a call a state of emergency, as he gave his outline saying that he had enhanced with the Governor General to establish this proclamentation. Well, he established a proclamentation and he said it was gazetted. So I would like to know what format was there to give the guarantee of that proclamentation being gazetted so the public at large to understand what was taken on that ground level. That's my question, please.
Well, caller, let me take the other questions and then I'll come down to yours to answer. But going back to the first caller, asking whether we were willing to work with the government, that is whether I was willing to work with the government. I have been in opposition, I have been in government before. I have a duty and a responsibility to provide services to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And it does not matter under what circumstance. Whether I'm in government, I will do so. Whether I'm in opposition, so it is that I will do. And whether or not I'm in the parliament, as long as I can provide service and leadership at any level, at every level, I am willing and available so to do. This situation with regard to COVID-19 and the Prime Minister and the government refusing to engage the opposition in finding national solutions to the issues that have arisen is very petty and very, very political. Every other country in the world, as far as I'm aware, there has been a closing of ranks so that the better of the country will take precedence. Where people have allowed their own petty differences to fall, their party differences to fall, and each group would have come together to ensure that the best solutions are found for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Here, the government obviously is uneasy to work with the opposition. The government is afraid it would appear to be overshadowed by the opposition. The government wants to try to do this alone, and it cannot do it alone. Apart from that, the reality is that over 50% of the voting population here in this country voted for the Labour Party, and therefore the Labour Party must have a voice. It will have a voice, whether it is a voice that is in concert with the voice of the government or on its own. It will have a voice. And that is why, despite the obvious petty challenges that we are facing, we continue to engage and to discuss and to throw out our ideas to the best of our ability so that our people, the citizens and residents of St. Kitts and Nevis, would be the beneficiaries of our ideas. We are not in any competition with the government. The government is the government. We are in the opposition. But we believe that we have good ideas, we have experience, we have knowledge that if this is put together with what the government provides, then it would only be better for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And that is all that we are seeking to do. We are not in any competition with anyone. When the time comes and we get engaged again in the election posturings in order to form a new government, we will do so. And we will do so quite vigorously, and we will do so successfully. But now we're talking about putting the interest of our people first. Too many people have been impacted. I don't think people understand how many people's lives have changed. I want to just imagine a young lady is working in the hotel industry. She would have gotten her paycheck last week or week before, I would say. A few weeks ago. But let us say the week before the crisis struck. And then she finds herself at home. No more salary. Something that she never even thought could have happened, because she would have been thinking that at least we'll get some kind of notice as the dull season for the tourist industry comes into being and the good times recede. There's no warning. And so people's lives have been dramatically interrupted, changed. People who are living in rented properties, you think it's a joke to be able to know that you just don't have the money at the end of the 2 weeks, 4 weeks to pay your rent? This is distressing. This is stressful to people. And that is why we are saying the attitude here is to find ways of assisting people through their difficulties. The opposition, this Labour Party, were in government for 20 years. We have the experience. We have managed several and many crises. It is the benefit of our experience that we wish to bear, not for the government, but for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so we have put aside the fact that their government, we are in opposition, where we put our people first, frontal and first. And we said, let us see what we can do, guys. And the government is playing petty politics. Well, let's move on, because I think the people understand what is really going on. The caller also mentioned what appears to be the absence of church leaders calling for us to work in a oneness and harmony in order to meet these challenges. I've had the privilege of meeting with members of the church community, and I know where their minds are, where their hearts are. I know that there's very little more than they can do, because I don't believe that even if they were to use, what should I say, the miracles of Christ to bring about a change, that it will just simply happen overnight. And the church can do that much and no more. I believe the church understands, at least on the situation with the COVID-19 crisis, the pandemic. As I said, I have had the benefit of meeting with them. I know they have met with the government, they have met with us. I know where their hearts are. I know exactly what they are hoping for. But I don't believe that they can work miracles. Whatever change has to come about from within us. Those to whom they have continuously beseeched to look at things differently. And in a way, I am very happy that I've had the opportunity to reflect, to think, to realize. When we think that we are really there on top, how easily it is that we can fall. And so, if this crisis has not taught us any lesson, one lesson I think we should try our very best to remember is that things are not in our hands, things are in the hands of God. And we are mere players. And it is God who really moves the players to fulfill his will. So I am not even worried, my dear people, with regard to the attitude of this government. I'm not worried at all, because I believe that we have mandate, we have a particular goal and objective. And as a result of that, once we understand and we are focused on what the goal is, to help people, to make lives better for the people, to make life better for the people. That's what our focus is. And whether we are doing it from the opposition benches or from the government benches, for us, it doesn't matter. It is actually helping people. Of course, I must say that if we were on the opposition, if we were on the government benches, we would have done a better job. I don't believe the government has done a complimentary job from what we have seen today. And so I come to the final call from, well, again, caller spoke of the attitude of the Deputy Prime Minister as against the attitude of the Prime Minister on visiting the camp at Springfield. When a Prime Minister is going to come out of a vehicle and using swearing language and say, open the, bar or gate, and the young soldier remained unmoved, unafraid, simply said, "Sir, I have been given instructions that everyone who comes into the compound must have his temperature taken." Whether or not you are the Prime Minister, how did Boris Johnson know that he was sick? His temperature had to be taken, isn't it? Suppose those who were responsible had said, "Oh, well, Boris, you look like you're okay, you're the Prime Minister, I'm not going to touch you, go." Probably would have died. You understand? Probably would have died. And so we cannot be that arrogant and strong and right. I want to use today's program to commend the young soldier who stood his ground, even though we understand that he was put in isolation, so to speak, in order to be maybe charged. I don't know if he was ever charged, but he was taken off the duty and put aside to be charged and told. I want to commend him, and I want us to pray that we would have persons like this young soldier who are unafraid and who will stand up and speak truth to power, whatever that power may be. I don't believe that the camp would have seen Dr. Harris, who is the Minister of National Security, to be in any good and high standing after that event. It speaks to the arrogance, again, of Dr. Harris. So many people have spoken of this arrogance, and here clearly demonstrating the very same thing. I hope that he would understand the hurt and the pain that he would have brought to the men and women who are embodied at Camp Springfield, and how much I'm sure they feel that they would have been let down by their own minister, who used that attitude of harassing a young soldier from doing the duty that he was asked by his superiors to do. Whereas his call about the curfew and the state of emergency, to some extent, removing certain privileges that have been given by our Constitution to our citizens. Basic rights would have been infringed. And I think it was on Sunday I saw a videotape and saw some pictures of a young man who claimed that he was beaten up by police after the police were saying to him, as far as I understand, and of course if there is a different story, I would like to hear it. But he was on his veranda, at his home, in his yard, He was told to go inside, I am told. He refused because he was on the premises, and later on, I understand, he was set upon and beaten badly and was arrested, etc. This really, if this story is true, I should say, this is very, very painful, because it speaks to what Ras Aya was saying. Are we withdrawing the constitutional rights of citizens in order for abuse of police power? This obviously must not be right. Again, we are saying, therefore, that if this has been the attitude of certain officers, can be all, certain officers, with regard to inflicting pain and abuse of some of our citizens, then it has to come to an end. It has to stop. I am not one of those who would in any way ask citizens and residents to be disrespectful and operate in a very ill-disciplined way in the presence of the law. But neither would I be able to condone any officer of the law to abuse the authority given to him and inflict unnecessary physical and other pain on the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. This is not right. And incidents like these, especially in atmosphere where people's mental state is already tested to the limit, what should happen is an easing of the pressure rather than a further exacerbation or increase in the pressure that is being placed on our fellow citizens here in St. Kitts and Nevis. You have a call,
Yeah, we've been told that the soldier was charged.
The soldier was charged.
Okay, let us go back to the phone lines and we welcome our next caller. Good evening, caller. Ask the leader.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Dr. Douglas. I got an issue. I ain't hear nobody address it yet. Food. Now, I'm a farmer. I'm into farming, you know that. Now, the Prime Minister said, we have enough food to last for 6 to 8 weeks. My interpretation of that is that there is no food. We have no food. The hope is that tropical will continue coming. My point is, the boats stop coming bringing people, and the planes don't bring people no more. How can we then depend on the boat to continue bringing food? My point is, within this, the quarantine and everything, and all respect to the laws and everything, crop farmers must be seen as essential workers. The food we have now in the ground is our bird in the hand. We are sure for that. If the crop farmers are not allowed to go to look after the food, is open there for monkeys and whatever else, we have no food. It means if the boat ain't come, we really then have absolutely nothing to eat. The government must see it as priority, not just to protect the food in the ground, but also to assist in producing more. We cannot wait. A lot of emphasis is being placed on livestock farmers. The director has on many occasions made himself available to livestock farmers for feed and bait-ical. That's good. We don't all eat pork and meat. And the cattle them dead and the pig them wild anyway. The crops we have in the fields at present is our bird in the hand. Nobody's paying attention to the food. But I see if this thing is continued by August and not going far, we have no food. We can depend on what we have. No, we can depend on ourselves. No, to begin now aggressively to increase food production. Farmers cannot be quarantined. They can't lock down farmers. We can't be rehoused. If we rehouse all, it doesn't make sense. Maybe some special provisions, and then we must think to those 1960-something laws. The farmers was the white man, them. Them was in the farm and they stayed under any kind of lockdown quarantine. Nobody could have stopped them. We got to look at what's happening now. This situation now must be addressed as a special situation. Farmers, Dr. Douglas, cannot be placed under quarantine at a time like now. In any case, most farmers are alone on the farm somewhere out in the mountain. He faces more risk from the corona in a house with a number of people. If it is, the quarantine is to protect the farmer in the open, the virus ain't flying. The farmer is safe. He poses no threat to anyone but himself, and according to the information, that's impossible. We have to rethink these things, and I don't know. Government needs to come up with a new plan. Are we going to run out of food? We're left in the food in the ground for monkey, pig, and everything else to feed on, while we depend on a hope that the ship won't come. Have a good day, my brother.
Thank you very much, caller. Dr. Douglas, before you answer that question, there's one which points out that the COVID-19 has brought with it new realities with which we must contend if we are to successfully navigate this crisis in St. Kitts and Nevis. How do you foresee the next few months unfolding, and what, in your opinion, would be the new norm?
Right. I believe that the situation that we are presently experiencing here, which would have been brought on by COVID-19 pandemic, it is going to be with us for some time. Many analysts have already projected that it will take at least 6 to 18 months before life can return to a degree of normalcy. And many are already saying that life as we used to know it may never be the same again. And this caller, speaking of the situation presently in agriculture, is in fact saying exactly that. Things could never be the same again. Therefore, in the interim, we must all come to terms with and accept the new realities that will govern our social, political, and economic interactions over the short to medium term. One of the things that I believe we must accept is the reality that food security has to be moved high up on the agenda of our future development here in St. Kitts and Nevis. We must invest seriously in what I believe is the last major sector the agricultural sector that we have not completely put on the best footing for our future in order to safeguard our food security. And what this young man has been saying is that it seems as though even in the midst of this crisis, we are still dependent upon the overseas transport systems, bringing food into our country for us to survive. When in fact, we are a country with one of the most fertile of all soils in the Caribbean region. The young man is saying they have been quarantined, they have been locked down in their homes as farmers. But the monkeys and the wild pigs are having a field day, reaping and destroying their crops, the very crops that humans depend upon for their livelihoods. So why is it there is no creativity and there is only lack of vision in not allowing the small farmers, livestock and the crop farmers, to go to their fields? Why? What is so difficult about that? I mean, if it's a situation where you have a farm has 20 employees, workers, and 5 of them will have been found with a positive test for COVID, coronavirus, for COVID, then you would know that that farm is infected somewhere. But the farms are spread out. We don't have that evidence because people are not being tested. So why lock down a farmer in a house and locking down 20 farmers in their homes and their crops are out there being destroyed and eaten by monkeys? And when the monkeys go to sleep at nights, the wild hogs come out at night and destroy the rest. I mean, this is ridiculous. And that is why I'm saying that as we move from COVID-19 and we look at our future in the next 6 to 18 months, things have to be different. The investment has to be made. The creativity, the innovation, something needs to be done definitely with regard to the destruction that we have seen and heard coming from these animals, the predators and the wild hogs. There have been projects, which I understand, have been formulated, presented to the Department of Agriculture with regard to control of monkeys and wild hogs. Where are those projects today? Are they being supported or not? The time has come for us to think differently for the future. And I want to, again, pick up on the point I was making, that now that we are living with COVID-19 and certain changes would have been made to the way that we conduct business, what are some of the changes that we would see in the future that would alter the way that we live? Firstly, you arrive at the airport or at the seaport. You're usually checked by the immigration officer and the customs officer. What about the port health officer? I want to submit that as of now and into the future, the port health officer becomes a critical person at our border, not just border security for the smuggling of goods and so forth, but checking people for proper health. Because the virus is going to linger around for quite a while until we are able to appropriately control it by way of vaccine, whether each of us would have been vaccinated through our natural systems of getting the disease, or we would have been given vaccinated, invented in the lab. So we have to have the port, the health port officer being a very important person from now on at our border as we check in and out. Social distancing and physical distancing, we will still need to continue for some time as we resume the regular activities of life, like going to the bank, shopping and even returning to school and places of work and places of worship. We're going to have to practice this for some time until we know we would have eradicated the epidemic scourge of the COVID-19 situation. I believe that a new regime of flexible hours at work would have to be instituted, where office staff are going to be rotated and persons are going to be allowed to work from their homes as much as possible. This is part of the new normal that will be in existence after the dust would have settled after COVID-19. Our schools will have to operate also more on a shift system and rely on online learning platforms for tutelage, for socialization, as we saw last night in our big party, for submission of projects and worksheets, and as well as exams. And this is why it is so unfortunate that our children, for the last 5 years, would have had a major setback technologically, because each of them would have had their own private personal laptop computer, which is now something of the past. But if this government is serious, even if it is going to be in office for the next 6 weeks, or 2 months, 8 weeks, it needs to give the children their own personal laptop computers. If this government is serious, even if their term to serve as the government of St. Kitts and Nevis is only short-lived, they have to bring computers for these children. It is wrong, almost an abuse to our children, for not having them the opportunity to learn by long distance, as the entire world is now doing, and as our Caribbean brothers and sisters are now introducing for the first time, catching us up 5 years after we suspended what was there for many years. And that is why the vision and the foresight of a government is critically important for the advancement of life here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so what would have been the lack of foresight and vision on the part of this Harris regime is now to the detriment of our students, who have to be home for several weeks and have to be self-taught at home, but they do not have the privilege of the new technology to assist them. Even the way that we conduct our elections in the future will have to be different. And even though, as we've heard, our parliament is going to be closed, if not before, the latest by the 13th or thereabout of May, even though the time is that short, the way we are going to have our elections conducted in the next few weeks will be again on the conditions of social and physical distancing. each of us will have to wear a mask as we go and approach the polling station, and as we take the ballot paper from the presiding officer, who I'm sure will be masked as well, and with gloves. That's the new norm. And if we are going to be handling the same lead pencil, I don't know whether each of us voting would also have to have gloves, which we discard when we finish making the X. Discard it in the bin outside and we walk away. In other words, life has changed. And even though the period of time is relatively short for our upcoming election campaign, we better begin to understand that social distancing and maybe a limit of the number of people who will be at each polling station will have to be instituted if we are going to obey the new realities that would have been brought upon us by COVID-19 pandemic. I also want to make the point that we may have to even look at how we are going to vote. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, don't know. Because you see, this is a situation where the rule of law and the governance of a country, they are critically important in the new circumstances and the paradigm shift that we would have seen as a result of COVID-19. But let me emphasize in the same breath, we are not at any war. There are some people who want you to believe that we are at war. We are not at any war here in this country. This is still a blessed, peaceful place. But the realities are certain changes would have to be made as a result of the visit of COVID-19 and the decision of COVID-19 to remain lingering with us for a prolonged period of time. We may need to do, therefore, a number of different things. In fact, there was the practice that we had instituted in the last election that essential service providers would have a different day to vote. That was promptly discarded by legislation passed by this present administration. Would we have to revisit that? Very fundamental question that has to be asked. Because what of the essential service workers, the policeman, the soldier, the nurse, the doctor, the healthcare workers generally, what of them in terms of having to carry out their duties and at the same time having to exercise what is their right as citizens to practice the franchise of voting. So I think these are some of the things that we would have to continue, we would have to consider. Availability of more agents to assist in carrying out the fundamentals of management of the campaign, more polling agents, more poll clerks, more people to be trained. Again, it is going to be a change in some of the fundamentals that we have seen in the conduct of doing business, whether it is voting, whether it is arriving at our ports of entry, whether it is standing in line in the bank, whether it is worshiping in service, whether you are giving communion or taking communion from the priest. All these things are going to be changed as a result of the lingering effects of COVID-19 here on life in St. Kitts and Nevis. We know that there are countries, for example, that have practiced and carried out elections under these circumstances. In the United States, Wisconsin, for example, had an election. And in South Korea, we know that the parliamentary elections in South Korea are going to be conducted over the next few days. We have already had the first round, and we are now going to have, in a matter of days, the general elections for the full parliament would be conducted for South Korea. And they would be carried out under the new protocols in circumscribing the spread of the coronavirus that causes COVID-19. And so I'm sure the government, well, I'm sure our Attorney General would want to go and see what happened in Wisconsin. Or he may go to South Korea and see what is happening there in South Korea. You see, the whole point is that things have changed. And if you think you're going to wait on things until things return to normal, I, Denzil Llewellyn Douglas, wish to submit today that there's going to be a new normal. And we better recognize that there's a new normal as of now, as of today. And we must plan for that new normal. I believe, therefore, that every crisis has its unique and distinctive features. And so this pandemic calls for social distancing, the requirements of which does not provide an insurmountable obstacle that cannot be easily and effectively managed in an election scenario. If our people can line up to shop for groceries, go to the pharmacy and to the bank, I myself experienced this. They can line up to vote in exercise of their democratic freedoms. Our people love our democratic freedoms just as much as they love food and medicine and money in the bank. They will line up to vote as they have lined up to buy food, to get their medicines to keep them well, and to get money from the bank to buy the food and the medicine. They will line up, and they will distance themselves 6 feet apart, and they would be gloved up and masked up in order so to do. You see, let us not fool ourselves. And so we have to be examining very carefully what we are being told by those who seem to have some kind of sinister agenda. Let us be careful. The authorities, I must admit, have more time than enough to plan properly for this new normal that is unfolding here in St. Kitts and Nevis as a result of the lingering of COVID-19 and the virus that causes it here in our country.
Dr. Douglas, it is time to go, but I must, on the insistence of someone who has just sent in an email which says, COVID-19 is not a war. It is a challenge which can be successfully overcome without compromising the fundamental and constitutional rights of every citizen and resident of St. Kitts and Nevis to elect a government every 5 years in accordance with the Constitution. Your closing remarks.
We definitely are not at war. I think the use of the figurative language of war in fighting COVID-19 It was intended to engender the seriousness with which we must confront what is a very contagious and deadly disease caused by a new virus, the coronavirus, that was causing or is causing COVID-19, which is mainly a respiratory type of disease, but which has taken very many lives, people who have died as a result of complications of other systems and the failure of other organs in the human body. And that is why I think, figuratively, it has been described as war. It's the seriousness and it is the nature of its effect on the human body. It destroys it, it kills it. We are definitely not at war. Not in the sense that we speak of war in our Constitution. That is why I say to our people, fear not. You are not at war. You are fighting a deadly disease. We shall overcome this disease. As a trained physician, I believe in the power of medicine as applied with the blessings of God. The human being will survive this as we have survived very many health challenges of the past. The St. Kitts Labour Party, attempts have been made to lock us out. My heart goes out to the young doctor, Dr. Joe, who has placed his heart on the table for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, but who has been basically discarded by the very ministry with whom he worked for several years as a specialist internist. I say to Dr. Joe, do not give up hope. You are good. Your intentions are good. The people of St. Kitts and Nevis will one day recognize what your intentions were, and you will be compensated with pride and joy of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. We are determined to lend our support to make life better, to ensure that the suffering which stalks the land today because of inadequate planning and where it would appear people's lives are being played with. I am certain that we will overcome. We will recognize that we are in a different level, a different state of what I describe now as a new normal. But we will adjust to that new normal. We are a creative and inventive people. And with the blessings and guidance of God, we shall overcome. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Douglas. We've just been informed that we have 2 new COVID-19 cases, which would take the tally up to, is that 14? However, remember, this broadcast can be heard tomorrow, midday, on KISS 102.5 FM at 12 noon on Wednesday. Once again, we thank all of you for listening and viewing this program. Until next week, we bid you a very positive week. Thank you and goodbye.